Everyone, welcome back for another episode of NeDNR's Around the Watercooler. Today we have Alexa, the co-host, me, Dehvynne, and Jim Williams. He's here to talk about a little bit of what water administration does and
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do on a day-to-day. We have some questions prepared.
Sure. I go by Jim Williams, but if you want to get in touch with me, you got to make sure that you use james.williams@nebraska.gov. You wouldn't believe how often my permissions have been set up incorrectly with the wrong name and that sort of thing. And folks have told me, I invited you to the meeting. But
Jeremy was like, oh, get in touch with Jim. He's going to be great for, NeRAIN in your podcast. I was like,
there's no Jim.
Where is he?
Who is that? He was like, his name is James. So I was like, oh, okay.
So we got that. I've been doing earth science-related things for about 35 years now, since graduate school. I've been with Department of Natural Resources for 22 years, coming August. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, been there quite a while. I've worn several hats at the department. Currently, I wear 3 hats, 3 major roles, try to fill in for various projects and so on, wherever Jeremy and his water administration group need me. So that would include working with the survey group. We mostly support the floodplain management folks and their mapping program, although we've done a lot of other work around the state working with the NRDs to get for wells, top of casing elevations, so they can correlate groundwater levels across the state. And we've worked for other groups within the Department of Natural Resources. And primarily what we do is simply elevation surveys. And obviously you need to know X and Y so you can know where you're finding out Z, but we don't work with political boundaries. It's simply topographic mapping. I also I'm the person who's been working with NeRAIN the longest. So
today we were actually going to ask you some questions about NeRAIN.
I'm ready and prepared for NeRAIN as well. I've been working with the program for 12 years, so that's fine. Fire away.
All right.
And I will come back and talk about stream gauging. And by way of introduction, that's my final point. The third hat that I wear at the state is I'm the engineer that the final checkoff on the stream gauging program, monitoring water flow, surface water flow throughout the state.
Yeah, so you guys are everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere, doing everything.
So we're going to just ask you a few questions.
What does NeRAIN stand for? Does it stand for something?
Sure. It's the Nebraska Rainfall Assessment and Information Network. So it is an actual acronym. We spell it with all capitals except the E in NE because that's taken from Nebraska. And we like it. It's one of the better acronyms out there because it's the name of the program, NeRAIN, but it's also a great question. Did you get NeRAIN today?
Oh, I get it. That's clever.
See, that's what we're going to name this episode. Got NeRAIN.
Yes.
Love that.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I'm glad that I nailed that then. I was like, I don't know if that's me going out on a limb, but...
That is the big question, yes. Sadly, lately here in the spring of 2022, the answer is mostly no. If any falls, we will track it.
All right. So could you give us just a general overview of the program and your involvement with it thus far?
Sure. Program was started by Rich Kern. Our first volunteers started reporting in 2004, so it's been going for quite a while now. We're coming up on 18 years, summer of 2022. Rich was an engineer with the department who had programming skills, and so he both programmed it and he also worked with the various NRDs to get some initial funding for it. And so that's one of the hallmarks of the program is that if you volunteer to report rainfall, you'll get a free rain gauge, and that's what the initial funding went to.
That is awesome.
And it's a program where we have citizen science volunteers upload once a day, unless they have an interest in uploading anything unusual like hail or a violent storm.
Is there any screening for these people who you allow to collect the data?
Initially, they did have quite a bit of screening criteria. They had a limited number of rain gauges, and they were trying to get one every square mile within urban areas and one within every township in rural areas, so every 36 square miles or 6 mile block. Lately, though, no, it's not really a screening on the account, but we do ask our regional coordinators to check out and make sure that the rain gauges are actually installed where they say they're going to be installed, that sort of thing. But there's not a lot of criteria, just the willingness to upload upload your information, and we prefer you do it every day.
So how many rain gauges are there in the program? Do you have like a rough estimate?
We have quite a bit of turnover. We have quite a few folks start to do it and then they stop. So I think total we've had folks sign up for something on the order of 4,000 rain gauges at this point. But daily activity is a much better number to track. And during the summertime when it is stormy, we do have most of the summer 500 to 600 volunteers upload their information daily. So how many in total are active at least a few times a year? Something less than 1,000.
That's still a pretty good amount of people that are doing it.
It's good to keep in mind, NeRAIN is part of, at first it was national, and then it's gone international program because there are volunteers in Canada as well as in the Caribbean.
That's crazy.
So all of our information gets uploaded to COCORAS, which is the national database, national organization. But for many years, Nebraska was one of the leaders in terms of number of active rain gauges given the population of the state.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea. That's awesome. We should
Yeah.
go to the Caribbean and bring a rain gauge.
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be my next assignment. Hey,
Yeah.
if you could put in a good word for me, I'll gladly fly to the
Check it
Caribbean.
out.
Yeah. Got to get that rainfall info.
So, do you train anybody on how to read the rain gauge, or is it like, is any data, I guess, do you trust the citizens that pull the data, or how does that work?
Every volunteer is trained. Takes about an hour. It can take longer if they have lots of questions. We've learned how to do it pretty well via a Zoom call. So I've trained quite a few during quarantine, during the pandemic. Of course, it's better to go in person. We work with a regional coordinator in every NRD office except for here in Lincoln, where the state is the regional coordinator, and that would be Kurt Inbody at this point. But there are 3 of us working with the state, and we trade around between regional and statewide coordinator. So a person would get their rain gauge from the local NRD, and there's somebody in that office who has that same training. If we have new regional coordinators, then very often the first few folks that they train, it'll actually be with me on the phone call, and we'll do the whole thing via Zoom. So the rain gauge is a very simple one. It's 4 parts in that we have a bracket that stays on a fence post or some other upright object. It is a large tube. It's a 4-inch diameter tube. There's a funnel that funnels that large area down to about a 1-inch inner tube, and that's the one that is graduated. It's essentially a graduated cylinder, and it's about a foot tall, but because you're funneling 4 inches diameter down to 1-inch diameter, that foot tall graduated cylinder holds 1 inch of rain. So it's very easy to read the rain gauge down to 1/100th of an inch. So that's the training we provide. We have 2 major mistakes that folks make when they are reporting. And it goes hand in hand with, do you train them? What goes on there. The first major mistake is that they'll do a decimal error. So when you're reading the rain gauge and you've got 5/100ths of an inch, it looks a little like half an inch. And so it's really easy to upload 0.5 instead of 0.05. And it's just as likely for a person to get in a hurry and they report 5 inches of rain in that case.
You're like, are you guys okay?
Yeah, exactly. Were the animals filing by 2 by 2? Or they're like, no, it's just drizzled a little bit. Okay, well, it was probably 0.05. Am I right? Yes, it was 0.05. The other issue is reporting it on the wrong date. This especially happens when a person reads their rain gauge across the weekend, but they don't fill it out till they get to a PC on Monday. They're sitting down at their office desk, and they remember that they got rained out at the picnic on Saturday afternoon. And so they remember that they were checking the rain gauge and they had 1.5 inches, so they cheerfully state that they had 1.5 inches on Saturday. Well, the issue is that we asked them to read the rain gauge every morning at 7 a.m. And it's not rainfall that's going to fall later that day. It's the rainfall that fell 24 hours preceding 7 a.m. So if you got rained out Saturday afternoon, that rain needs to go on Sunday morning. So,
is there a reason why you picked 7 in the morning to have the rain gauges read?
Statistically, it seems in the Midwest, in Nebraska, that we don't typically get our storms at that time, and it's always better to have it when it's not going to be storming. Very rarely, once a year, it'll actually be raining when I empty and check my rain gauge. The second thing is we just want folks to get in the habit of whatever their morning routine is, check it as they head out the door, or put the coffee on, step outside, read the rain gauge.
Take your coffee outside and drink it while you're looking.
Okay, yeah,
when
exactly.
You're done measuring, take the water out of the gauge, make
Put
coffee.
It should be good water, yeah.
So there is an element of fact checking, is what you're saying then.
Yes, CocoRoz does do error checking for us, and I think they pretty much go through and just look at the maps, and major errors, the date error or the decimal place error, they both pop out really clearly on a map.
Yeah, I would see. There's a big difference between 0.5 and 5 inch.
You mentioned something about hail. Do a lot of people collect hail or snow? Do any kind of precipitation, is that collected, or is it just specifically rain?
We also like for them to report on hail. There's an issue in that the hail report form is somewhat complicated. It will ask for largest, smallest, mean. It asks, was it cloudy or clear? Those things are incredibly interesting to a meteorologist because it tells a lot about where the hail formed, how high, how long it bounced around in the clouds. In other words, the violence of the storm before it finally falls. We also ask questions about hail damage, that sort of a thing. So, yes, we very much like to collect that information, and it is definitely used by all kinds of reasons. I have insurance agents call me and ask, do I know anything about a hailstorm in a particular location on a particular date? And I'm able to look it up, and if there's any reports anywhere around there, that's always very interesting to them.
So it's not just somebody going out with a golf club to their car being like,
exactly.
If I slide you a 5.
And you hear stories about agents driving around just to check on customers, or maybe they've already reported it. They find people on the roof with a ball peen hammer, making sure there's hail damage. But the worst damage I've ever heard of was actually the daughter of our insurance agent purchased a fifth wheel trailer and redid it, the whole interior. She and her husband put a lot of work into it, and they were going to travel the country for a while before they settled down. And she and her husband came from Denver area to Lincoln, where there was a hailstorm, and they had 6-inch holes in the floor of the trailer.
Oh
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was
you could get
huge.
seriously hurt with that kind of hail.
Oh yeah. It went right through the roof, didn't slow down at all, hit the floor and put in big holes. So hail can be very, very damaging.
So good thing they weren't in there, is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah.
Man,
so instead they collected the insurance money and traveled the world instead of just traveling the U.S. But so, yes. Now, one thing I'd like to point out is that because it's intimidating, very often on our daily precipitation form, we have a box for comments, and we encourage people to use that. Those can be very useful. And so they'll quickly fill out, had some hail, melted before I got home, some comment like that, and they don't fill out the hail thing. And talking to the gentleman that runs the national database out of Colorado, those kinds of comments come in probably 10 times as often as that hail form is filled out. And so, again, going back to the training, we try to go through the form and make sure they're not intimidated by it. If you fill it out on the hail form, whatever whatever the kids reported that they saw while they were out playing, that can be very helpful.
For other purposes, or for other people who may not just be like, hey, I want to do this, would a classroom, or have you had any schools volunteer to participate in the program, or is it? We
have not seen that very often in Nebraska, but around the country there are places where that is a pretty cool thing. And yes, we'd love to have far more schools doing it. It's the kind of thing that's pretty neat in that, even first graders can be trained to read the gauge. And it's a great way to train them. Certainly middle school science classes, it'd be great to train around the duty of doing that. And by the way, when we say read the gauge at 7 a.m., we'd really like to get the information 2 hours either side of that time frame. But by 8 or 9 a.m., you can still correlate the data, if you will. It's not at night when you get home, for example. So it still works well with a classroom situation.
You can have the teacher record in the morning and then have the kids go out there and say, oh.
Yeah, confirm it.
That's like one of their math questions. If this teacher went out at 6 in the morning and saw the level at this, and at 9 it was this, what's the difference?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah, that's really exciting. That's interesting stuff. Do you have any other interesting facts or tidbits about NeRAIN that you want to just throw out there for fun?
Yeah, I'll just point out the rain gauge holds a foot of water. If you have more than that, you're probably not too worried about how much is in your rain gauge exactly. There will be other things that you'll want to be looking
Finding
at.
a boat.
Yes, finding a boat. Yeah, so once that inner graduated cylinder, which holds your 1st inch, once it's full, it spills over into the entire 4-inch tube. And so that when you pour it off, you take out the inner cylinder very carefully, making sure any droplets stay in the big tube, and you discard it. And it's calibrated to be exactly 1 inch of water. And then you use the funnel to carefully fill it almost all the way, but don't spill any. So it's going to go to 0.89 or 0.95. And then if you got a memory like I do, you have to write it down. Okay. Because if you have 2 or 3 or 4 refills of that, you're working on 2 or 3 inches of rain, you're going to want it written down. And then you add them up, and that's your total rainfall. We also have the ability to record extreme events, we call them, but basically violent thunderstorms or blizzards with high wind. And that goes also on a separate form within the website. And so that is used actually by the National Weather Service in real time to calibrate their radar returns.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so, I did not know that.
They love it because they can... while they've got rain stations all over the place, still it can be a couple 100 miles between National Weather Service weather stations, the standalone, very expensive units that are out there. And so observation by a volunteer can be very good, very useful.
Yeah, that's really cool. Are there ever too many in one area where you're like,
well, that's how you weed out the bad ones. 0.5.
I'll tell you, only one time have I had a volunteer get upset. She had been volunteering for just a few months, like 6 months or so. And she called me up absolutely furious that we had accepted another volunteer in the same town. And I tried to explain to her, there's real value in having 2 people recording, even as close as you are. It would be fantastic.
Checks and balances almost,
or different rainfall in different parts.
You would be shocked how different they could be just a few blocks apart. And that's really interesting information, especially since on an annual basis, it generally averages out. So it's all going to be pretty close to the official report from the airport. But, it might be 10 or 20% off from that, either high or low. And that's really interesting to know. The other reason that we do like to accept anybody who's interested is that, quite frankly, we have high turnover within the system. Now, we do have quite a few volunteers who are still reporting 18 years later.
Oh my gosh.
Ooh.
Yes, we do have quite a few long-term ones. But you never know when someone's going to retire and move away, or if they switch jobs, they may just not have time for it anymore. Or they may move into an apartment. Now they don't have any space because you want to have...
You don't
want a rain gauge right up against the side of the building. You want to have clear skies above them.
Not underneath a patio, for example.
Yeah, it doesn't work so well there. So we lose volunteers all the time for various reasons. And for that reason, it's nice to have somebody else come in and start reporting, even if they're on the same block as one of our current volunteers.
Yeah, so, if anyone's interested, definitely check out the NeRAIN website and or get in contact with Jim Williams, a.k.a. James Williams.
Yeah, on the NeRAIN website, as you come into it from your search engine, one of the pages is the help page. And their top and center would be people to contact. And on that page, you've got a listing of who to contact in each of the NRD offices. And down at the bottom of the page, you can see the statewide coordinators. And my name, email address, and phone number are there. So.
Yeah, that's right. Forgot to mention it won't be Jim necessarily teaching you. It might be one of our NRDs, so get in contact with us.
Certainly. But feel free to contact me. It's james.williams@nebraska.gov. My phone number's on that page as well. So.
That is awesome.
Well, we have one question left for you. If you could only eat one kind of food or one certain type of food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Potatoes.
That was very fast.
You got French fries, you got hash browns, tater tots, potato chips. That's smart.
That's right. You can have them in any form. That's great. That's
and
a
I
good
would
answer.
cheat as much as I could. So there's all the dips and stuff you can put on it, like cheesy broccoli, right? So that's still potatoes.
You found the flaw in our question.
No, the other reason I do that is because I read somewhere from a nutrition expert that potatoes actually are a very well-rounded source of a lot of the micronutrients, and they have some protein, but they also are a good form of energy. So.
Yeah, actually, I think I read that too, that you can survive off of just potatoes for like months.
A long time.
Yeah.
So I forget what the movie was, but they were growing potatoes on Mars. That was actually a realistic concept. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other things there that would be closer to fiction, but the idea would be a person could survive quite a while on it. But yeah, I love potatoes.
Potatoes are great. Thank you for your
life.
answer. All right. Well, thank you, Jim, for joining us today. It was really interesting talking about NeRAIN.
Thanks for joining us. And if we have any questions, you know where to go on the website.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and I want to urge anybody listening to feel free to contact us and become a volunteer if you're interested.
That's right. Sign up, everybody. Well, thank you so much for listening.
And break time's over.
Break time is over.
Okay, back to work.